Adam and Eve, Genesis 2 through 3. There was no one to care for the earth, so God created a man from the dust of the ground. God breathed the breath of life into the man, and he became a living being. His name was Adam. God created a wondrous garden to the east in a place called Eden. God put Adam in the garden to take care of it. A river ran through Eden, bringing water for the plants and trees, which were heavy with fruit. But in the middle of the garden stood a tree unlike all the others. It was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You can eat the fruit from every tree, God warned Adam. But if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will die. Then God brought all the animals to Adam so that he could name them. Adam gave names to all the tame and wild animals, and to all the birds that flew in the sky. God saw that Adam was alone. I will make a helper for him, he said. God put Adam into a deep sleep. As he slept, God took one of Adam's ribs and formed it into a woman. The woman's name was Eve, and God brought her to Adam. Adam and Eve lived a peaceful life in Eden. They had never known sin or evil. Often on cool evenings, they would walk and talk with God. One day, everything changed. As Eve was walking alone, she came upon an evil serpent. The serpent came from a tree and approached her. "Can you eat from any tree in the garden?" he hissed. Eve told the serpent that they could eat from any tree but one. "If we eat from this tree or even touch it," she said, "God says we will die." "You will not die," said the serpent. "God fears that if you eat this fruit, you will become like him. He does not want you to be as wise as he is." The serpent's words tempted Eve so much that she took the fruit and bit into it. Then she found Adam and gave him the fruit to eat as well. For the first time, Adam and Eve felt fear and shame. Aware of their nakedness, they gathered fig leaves and wove them together for clothes. When they heard God walking in the garden, they were afraid and they hid. "Adam, where are you?" God called. "Lord, I heard your voice, but I was afraid, so I hid," Adam answered. "Have you eaten fruit from the forbidden tree?" God asked. "Eve gave me the fruit and I ate it," said Adam. "Why did you disobey me?" God asked Eve. "The serpent tempted me to eat the fruit," she replied. God turned angrily to the serpent. "Cursed are you above all animals and wild creatures on earth," he said. "From now on and forever, you shall crawl on your belly and eat dust." Then God spoke to Adam and Eve. "Because you have disobeyed me, you must work hard all the days of your life. You will earn your bread by the sweat of your brow. You are dust, and to dust you shall return." God drove Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. He placed an angel with a flaming sword at the entrance to keep them out forever. Cain and Abel, Genesis 4. Though God had punished Adam and Eve, he still loved them. Soon they had a baby boy whom they named Cain. A few years later, God sent Adam and Eve a second son, who they called Abel. When they were older, Cain worked in the fields, growing food for the family, while Abel tended sheep. Adam and Eve and their two sons often presented gifts to God to honor him. They built altars of stone, and on top of the altars they burned special offerings. One day Cain and Abel brought gifts to the altar. Cain brought fruit, while Abel offered a fat lamb. God was pleased with Abel's gift, but not with Cain's. Cain grew angry and felt jealous of Abel. "Why do you look so angry, Cain?" God asked. "If you try to do well, I will accept you. When you do not try to do well, evil lurks at the door." Cain could not overcome his jealousy. "Let us go out into the fields," he said to his brother. When they got to the fields, Cain turned on his brother and murdered him. God then called out, "Cain, where is Abel, your brother?" "I do not know," Cain lied. Am I my brother's keeper?" "What have you done?" God said. "Your brother's blood is on the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground. When you till the soil, it will yield no fruit. You shall have no home for the rest of your life. You will live all your life as an outcast who wanders the earth." "My punishment is greater than I can bear," cried Cain. "Your face will be hidden from me. Whoever finds me will kill me." God was merciful. He put a special mark on Cain to protect him. Then Cain went away from the presence of God to the land of Nod, east of Eden. Noah and the Ark. Genesis 6 through 9. As time passed, more people were born into the world. Gradually, they began to turn away from God. They became so violent and wicked that God regretted his creation. "I wish to destroy the creatures on the face of the earth," God said. "Man and beast, creeping things, and birds of the air." Only one man found favor in God's eyes. His name was Noah. When others turned away from God, Noah remained faithful. One day, he lived peacefully with his family and served God with all his heart. One day, God spoke to Noah and said, "I am going to destroy all the evil on earth. I will send a great flood that will cover the whole world and wash away all the evil." God then commanded Noah to build a large boat of cypress wood, 45 feet wide and 450 feet long. The boat was called an ark. God told Noah to bring every kind of food and of every kind of bird and beast onto the ark. All these creatures would live with Noah and his family on the ark until it was safe to return to land. Noah and his son got to work at once, and they cut cypress wood and hammered it together. Then they waterproofed the wood by sealing it with tar. When the ark was ready, Noah rounded up the animals and birds 2 by 2. The animals walked up the ramp to the boat. And then Noah and his family climbed aboard. "In 7 days I will send rain," said God. "It will rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Every living thing will be blotted out from the face of the earth." God closed the door of the ark, and soon Noah and his family could hear the sound of rain on the roof. It rained for 40 days and nights. It rained as it had never rained before. The waters rose higher and higher until they covered the earth. The waters rose above the tallest mountains, drowning all creeping, flying, and swimming creatures. Every living thing on earth died, except the people and animals on Noah's ark, as the sturdy ark bobbed on the high waves. The mightiest flood could not sink it. But God did not forget Noah and all who were with him. God sent a huge wind blowing over the earth, and slowly the waters began to subside. The fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven finally closed, and the rain stopped. At last, the tops of mountains began to peep through waters, and the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. Noah wanted proof that the flood waters had gone down all over the earth, So he opened the window and sent forth a raven. The raven flew back and forth across the sky without landing. Next Noah sent forth a dove. When the dove also returned, Noah knew it was still not safe to leave the ark. He waited another 7 days and sent the dove out again. This time the dove flew back with a freshly plucked olive leaf in its mouth. Noah knew the waters had gone down. 7 days later he sent the dove again. This time the bird did not return, and Noah knew it was finally safe to leave the ark. God blessed Noah and his family and made a promise to them. Never again will all living things be destroyed by flood waters, God said. The sign of this promise will be a rainbow. When you see a rainbow shining through the clouds, you will know that I shall never again destroy every living thing on earth. And when I look down and see the rainbow, I will remember my promise to you. As Noah and his family and all the animals left the ark, a rainbow shone through the clouds and gave them comfort and hope. The Tower of Babel. Genesis 10 through 11. After the time of the flood, Noah's children began to have children. Over time, many people lived on earth. One day, Noah's descendants decided to build a tower that would reach to the heavens. Our tower will make us powerful and draw us all together, they said, so we can never be scattered across the earth. The builders set to work making thousands of bricks. They heated them well to give them strength. Then they made mortar out of tar to hold the bricks together. At this time on earth, everyone spoke the same language. Since all the builders understood one another, their work went smoothly, and soon the mighty tower began to rise into the sky. Its great height made people feel powerful and proud. When the tower was at its tallest, God visited the city. What he saw did not please him. God thought that the tower had made everyone too proud. People now believed that there was nothing they could not do. They thought everything was within their reach. God wanted to teach the people a lesson, so he made everyone start babbling in different and confusing languages. The tower builders could no longer understand one another, so they were forced to stop their work. People then separated into groups, each speaking a different language. The groups scattered over the face of the earth, and many nations rose up where once there had been only one. The Call of Abram. Genesis 12 through 13 and 15. A good man named Abram once lived in a place called Haran. For many years, Abram had been happily married to a woman named Sarai. Their only sadness was that they had no children. One day, God spoke to Abram, "You and all your family have my blessing. Your people will someday become a great nation. Go now to the land where I direct you." Abram and his large family packed their belongings and took down their tents. They gathered their flocks of goats and sheep and herds of cattle. Then they headed south toward the land of Canaan. Troubles began for Abram soon after he entered Canaan. There was not enough grass for all the livestock belonging to his family, and servants began quarreling over whose animals should get the most food in the best grazing lands. But Abram was a generous man. He allowed his nephew Lot to choose the best land for himself. Lot chose Sodom on the plain of Jordan, for the land was lush and green. Abram and his wife stayed in Canaan. One day, God appeared before him and said, "Look north, south, east, and west. I will give you and your descendants all of this land." Abram was puzzled. How could he have descendants when he had no children, he wondered. "Do you see the night sky?" God asked. "I will give you a son and as many descendants as there are stars in the sky." Then God told Abram to prepare a sacrifice. Following God's orders, Abram killed a cow, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon. He cut all the animals in half except the birds, and he placed them on the altar. For the rest of the day, Abram fended off the birds of the prey that circled above the dead animals. Before night came, Abram was exhausted and fell into a deep sleep. As he slept, the terrible darkness descended upon him. The voice of God came out of the darkness. "Know that you and all your descendants will travel in lands you do not own. For 400 years, your people will suffer at the hands of others. The people in these lands will be cruel and make slaves of your people. But then your descendants will leave and return to their own land. They will be prosperous and take their wealth with them. You yourself will live to be a very old man, and you will die in peace." When night fell, Abram saw an amazing sight. Out of the darkness emerged a touch of fire and a smoking firepot. As Abram watched, the torch began to move. It slowly passed over and around the sacrificial animals on the altar. Three strangers. Genesis 16 through 18 and 21. In spite of God's promise, Abram and his wife Sarai remained childless. As Sarai grew older, she became convinced that she would never have a child. Reluctantly, she urged Abram to have a child with Hagar, her Egyptian servant. Abram did as Sarai asked, but trouble began when Hagar became pregnant. She began to treat Sarai with contempt and scorn. When Sarai complained to Abram, he said, "Hagar is under your control. You may do with her as you please." Sarai's punishment of Hagar was so harsh that Hagar ran away from Abram's house. As she rested by a spring, she heard the voice of God. "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" Hagar had explained that she was running away from Sarai's wrath. "Return to Sarai," God said. "Do what she wants, and I will give you descendants too numerous to count." Hagar returned to Abram's house, and soon after she gave birth to a son for Abram. She named the boy Ishmael, which means God hears. Abram was 86 when Ishmael was born. When Abram was 99, he still had not had a child with Sarai, but God reassured him that his promise would soon come true. "You shall be the father of many nations," God told Abram. No longer will your name be Abram. From now on, your name will be Abraham. You and your descendants will have all the land of Canaan. As for Ishmael, I will bless him, and he will be the father of 12 princesses and of a great nation. Sarai will now be called Sarah. In a year she will have a son, and you will call him Isaac. Shortly thereafter, God sent another son to Abraham. When Abraham was sitting in front of his tent in the heat of the day, he saw 3 strangers walking down the dusty road. Abraham rushed forward to greet them. "Come in, my friends," Abraham said. "Let us bring water to wash your tired feet. Please rest under the tree while we prepare some food." Abraham hurried to the tent and asked Sarah to make some bread. Then he told his servants to prepare a calf for a meal. Abraham also served curds and milk to his guests. Standing under a tree, he waited patiently while they ate. "Where is your wife?" one of them asked. Abraham explained that Sarah was inside the tent. "She will soon have a son," one of the strangers said. Abraham realized the stranger was God himself. Sarah was eavesdropping from inside the tent. When she heard God's prediction, she began to laugh. She didn't believe that a woman of her age could have a child. "Why is Sarah laughing?" God asked Abraham. "Is there anything too wonderful for me to do?" Sarah was worried that God had heard her laughing. "But I did not laugh," she protested. "That is not true," God said, "for I heard you laugh." God kept his promise to Abraham. Soon Sarah gave birth to a beautiful boy. Abraham named the baby Isaac, which means laughter, because God had made Sarah laugh. The destruction of Sodom. Genesis 18 through 19. When the men left Abraham's tent, he walked along with them for a while. They saw the town of Sodom in the distance. God told Abraham that Sodom was filled with wicked people, and he would soon destroy them. Abraham was afraid. Abraham was afraid for his nephew Lot, who lived in Sodom. "Will you destroy the good people with the wicked?" he asked God. "Suppose there are 50 good people who are in this city. As judge over all the earth, are you not supposed to be just? If 50 righteous people can be found, I will not destroy the city," God said. Abraham was still worried. "I know I am only dust and ashes," he said, "but what if there are 45 good people there?" Once more, God relented and promised not to destroy the city with 45 innocent people in it. "I know that you might be angry, so I will only ask these few times," Abraham said. "But what if there are 30 good people, or 20, or even 10 good people in the city?" "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy this city," God promised. Then Abraham and God parted company. Later that evening, 2 angels walked up to Sodom. Abraham's nephew Lot was sitting by the city gates. When he saw the strangers, Lot stood and bowed down to the ground in greeting. "Come this way to my house," said Lot. "You can wash your feet and spend the night. Then you can get up early and go on your way." The 2 angels told Lot they would sleep in the square, but he insisted they come with him to his house. There Lot prepared a feast for them, and they ate. After dinner, Lot and his guests heard shouting in the streets. The men of Sodom had surrounded the house. They demanded Lot to bring out the strangers so that they could harm them. Lot went outside, closing the door behind him. "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly," he said. "I cannot send out guests who have taken shelter in my house." And the crowd grew angry and pushed Lot aside. He began beating on the door, trying to break it down. Quickly the angels pulled Lot back into his house. As shouts of rage grew louder, the 2 angels blinded everyone in the crowd. Then the angels turned to Lot. Are any of your family here?" they said. "Get them out. God will destroy this city." Lot dashed through the city and found the young men who were planning to marry his daughters. "Hurry, make haste," he cried. "God is about to destroy Sodom." But the young men did not believe Lot, and they refused to leave the city. As morning dawned, Lot woke his wife and daughters. They dressed quickly and dashed out of the city gates. "Run for your lives. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley," the angels urged. "Hurry to the hills or you will die." As Lot and his family fled from the city, fire and sulfur rained from the heavens, God destroying everything in Sodom, the buildings and all the people. Lot's wife did not obey the angels. She turned around and gave one last look at the burning city. In an instant, she was turned to a pillar of salt. The next morning, Abraham looked out toward the city and the valley. There in the distance, all he saw was smoke rising from the place where Sodom had once stood. Ishmael and Isaac. Genesis 21. When Sarah's son Isaac grew older, Sarah did not want his half-brother Ishmael to share his inheritance. "You must send Hagar and her son away," she told Abraham. Isaac and Ishmael should not grow up together as equals. Abraham was distressed, for he loved Ishmael and as much as he loved Isaac. "Don't be unhappy," God comforted Abraham. "Do what Sarah asked, and someday I will give Ishmael many descendants, and they too will become a great nation." Abraham rose early the next morning. He gave bread and water to Hagar. Then he sent her and her son away, toward Beersheba. Hagar and Ishmael wandered into the wilderness alone. When they had drunk all their water and were thirsty, Hagar sat down in despair and closed her eyes. Ishmael began to weep. God heard the boy crying, and he spoke to Hagar. "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid. Stand up and take Ishmael by the hand and walk. I will take good care of him. Give him descendants great in number, and make a great nation of him." When God opened Hagar's eyes, she was amazed to see a well nearby. She filled her water container and gave Ishmael a long drink. Then they gathered their strength and went on their way. From that time on, God cared for Ishmael during his days in the wilderness. As he grew up, the first son of Abraham became an expert with the bow and arrow. And when he was older, he married a woman from the land of Egypt. The sacrifice of Isaac. Genesis 22. One day, God decided to test Abraham. "Take your son Isaac and go to the land of Moriah," God said to Abraham. "There you must sacrifice the boy to me on one of the mountains." Abraham loved his son dearly, but he wanted to obey God. With a heavy heart, he rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and called Isaac to him. Then Abraham ordered 2 of his servants to bring wood for a burnt offering. For 3 days, father and son journeyed toward Moriah. When Abraham saw the place in the distance, he told his servants to wait. "Stay here with the donkey," he ordered. "My son and I will go ahead and worship God. Then we will come back to you." As Isaac and Abraham started walking toward the mountain, Isaac was puzzled. "Father, we have fire and wood, but where is the lamb for our burnt offering?" "God will provide the lamb for the offering, my son," said Abraham. Soon Abraham and Isaac came to the place for the sacrifice. God commanded Abraham to build an altar and place wood on top of it. Then Abraham tied Isaac up and lifted him onto the altar. Slowly he took out a knife and lifted it into the air. Just as Abraham was about to slay his beloved son, God called out to him, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Here I am," answered Abraham. "Do not lay your hand on the boy," said an angel of the Lord. "Because you are willing to sacrifice your beloved son, I know you fear God, and you will obey his commands." At that moment, Abraham saw a ram caught by his horns in a thicket. He slew the ram instead of his son, Isaac, and he gave the animal to God as an offering. The angel of the Lord spoke to Abraham a second time. "Abraham, since you are going to obey me, I will bless you. Your descendants will be as many as the stars of heaven, and as the grains of sand on the shore, and they will all be blessed. All the nations of the earth will be blessed because you obeyed my voice. Rebecca at the well. Genesis 23 through 24. Abraham's wife Sarah lived a long life. When she died at a great age, Abraham knew that he was very old as well. He called for his most trusted servant. You must promise that you will not allow my son Isaac to marry a woman from the land of Canaan, Abraham said. Promise me that you will go to the birthplace of my ancestors and find a wife for him there. The good servant promised to follow Abraham's wishes. Abraham gave the servant many special gifts to take with him. The man packed the gifts on 10 camels and traveled to the land of Aram Naharaim until finally he came to the city of Nahor. As dusk was falling, the servant made his camels kneel down for the night. Nearby, women from the town were drawing water from a well. Dear God, the servant prayed, help me find a wife for the son of Abraham. Please give me a sign. Let the girl who gives me and my camels a drink of water be the one who I should choose for Isaac. Before the servant had finished praying, a lovely girl named Rebecca came to the well. She began filling a jar with water. As the girl turned to leave, Abraham's servant ran up to her and asked for a drink. Here, my lord, said Rebecca, and she gave him water. When the servant had finished drinking, Rebecca offered to get water for his camels. The servant gazed at her in silence, wondering if God was truly answering his prayer. By the time his camels had finished drinking, the servant knew in his heart that Rebecca was a wife God wanted for Isaac. He gave her gifts of a gold nose ring and 2 heavy bracelets. Whose daughter are you? He asked. Is there room in your father's house for us to stay? Rebecca assured the servant that he would be welcome at her house. We have straw and fodder for your camels, she promised. The man then bowed his head and thanked God for leading him to Rebecca. Rebecca hurried home to prepare for the visitors. When her brother Laban saw the gifts that Abraham's servant had given her, he rushed forward to greet the visitor. He then led the servant into his house and prepared a meal for him. I cannot eat before I tell you why I am here, the man said. He explained that he had come from Abraham, who blessed by God with riches and greatness. He said that his master had sent him to his homeland to find a wife for his son, and Rebecca was the girl whom God has chosen. Realizing the servant was doing God's will, Laban gave permission for Rebecca to go to Isaac. The servant praised God and gave the rest of the gifts to Rebecca and her family. Early the next morning, Rebecca's mother and brother begged the servant to allow her to stay with them for 10 more days. But the man replied that he could not delay their departure. As Rebecca and her servants rode away on their camels, her family ran along beside them. They called out their blessings and wished her many descendants. Rebecca arrived at Abraham's house just as night was falling. Looking out over the fields, she saw Isaac walking there. She covered her face with her veil and walked shyly toward him. Isaac reached out and took her hand. Soon after, Isaac married Rebecca, and he loved her with all his heart. Jacob and Esau. Genesis 25 through 30. As the years passed, Rebekah and Isaac had no children. Isaac prayed that God would grant them a child. God heard Isaac's prayer, and soon Rebekah was pregnant with twins. The first child to be born was a boy named Esau. He had a red complexion and a red hairy body. Esau's twin brother, Jacob, was born next, holding on to Esau's heel. As the twins grew up, Jacob became his mother's favorite. He was a quiet boy who liked to stay home. Esau was his father's favorite son, for he was a good hunter and always brought home game for the family to eat. One day Esau came in from the fields and smelled a delicious stew that Jacob was cooking. "Give me some of your stew. I am famished," Esau said. "First, you must give me all the special rights that are yours, since you are the firstborn son," said Jacob, "and then I will give you some stew." "My rights will do me no good if I die from hunger," Esau said. He promised to give his birthright to Jacob. Then, after he had gobbled up the food, Esau returned to the fields. As a year passed, Isaac became nearly blind. Before he died, he called to Esau. "My death could come at any time," Isaac said to his oldest son. "But go into the fields with your bow and arrow, and shoot some game for me. After I eat it, I will give you my blessings before I die." Rebekah overheard their conversation. She hurried to tell Jacob while Esau was hunting. "Now do as I say," she said. "Go into the fields and bring me 2 baby goats. I will prepare the goat stew that your father loves. Then he will bless you instead of Esau before he dies." Jacob was puzzled. "My brother is a hairy man, and I am not," he said. "What if father touches me and feels my smooth skin? Then he will curse me rather than bless me." "I will take on your curse," Rebekah said. "Just do as I say." When Jacob returned with the goats, she made him put on Esau's clothes. Then she covered his hands and neck with goat skin. Jacob went into Isaac's room with the goat stew. "My father," he said, "I am your son Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you asked. Please sit up and eat the game I have brought, and give me your blessing." Isaac asked Jacob to come closer. "Your voice sounds like Jacob's," he said, "but your hands feel like Esau's. Are you really Esau?" "I am, father," Jacob answered. Isaac asked Jacob to come closer and kiss him. As Jacob kissed him, Isaac smelled his clothes. They smelled like the earth and fields. Isaac then blessed Jacob, saying, "My son smells like the fields that God has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let the nations and people bow down and serve you. Be lord over your brother. Anyone who harms you will be cursed, and everyone who blesses you will be blessed." When Esau returned from the hunt, he cooked the game he had shot. As his father had asked, he took it to him. "Father, rise and eat the game I brought, so that I might have your blessing," he said. "Who are you?" Isaac asked. "I am Esau, your oldest son." Isaac trembled violently. "Then who has already hunted game and come to me and been blessed?" When Esau heard this, he knew at once that his brother had stolen his blessing, and he cried out in anguish. He rushed to his father and pleaded with him, "Bless me also, my father." Isaac realized with horror that he had been tricked into giving his special blessing to Jacob. He knew that by law he could not bless Esau in the same way. Esau was heartbroken. "First Jacob took my birthright, and now he has taken my blessing?" he said. "Have you not saved a blessing for me? Is that the only blessing that can be given?" Sadly, Isaac could not give his firstborn his blessing. "You will live away from the richness of the earth, Esau," he said. "You will serve your brother and live by your sword, but then you will break free and not be served to serve him any longer." Esau's heart filled with hatred. He began to plot Jacob's death. When Rebekah discovered this, she told Jacob to flee to her brother Laban's house in Haran. Rebekah advised Jacob to remain there until Esau's anger had cooled. Jacob quickly left his family and began the journey to Haran. He walked until it was dark, and then he lay down, and using a stone for a pillow, fell asleep. As Jacob slept, he dreamed about a great ladder that reached from heaven to earth. Angels were climbing up and down the ladder. God stood up at the very top. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, God said. The land upon which you sleep I will give to you and your descendants. I will always be with you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have kept this promise. When Jacob woke up in the next morning, he was filled with awe. He named the place where he had slept Bethel, which means house of God. Then Jacob made a vow. If God protects me and lets me return to my father's home in peace, I will be faithful to him and give him 1/10 of all my wealth. Jacob continued on his journey. When he drew close to Haran, he saw a girl caring for her father's sheep. She was Laban's daughter, Rachel. Jacob spent a month at Laban's house, and during that time he fell deeply in love with Rachel. One day, Jacob went to Rachel's father. If I work for you for 7 years, will you allow Rachel to marry me? Yes, said Laban. Jacob's love for Rachel was so deep that the years went by as quickly as days. At the end of 7 years, Jacob went to Laban to ask for Rachel's hand. Laban gathered all the men of Haran for a big wedding celebration. But that evening he played a trick on Jacob. He took Leah, Rachel's older sister, into Jacob's tent instead of Rachel. As Leah's face was hidden by a veil, Jacob did not discover that he had married Leah instead of Rachel until the next morning. Furious, Jacob hurried to Laban. "What have you done to me?" he cried. "You have tricked me. I worked all these years to marry Rachel." "In our country, the older girl marries before the younger one," said Laban. "Serve me another 7 years, and I will give Rachel to you." Jacob served Laban for another 7 years. Then he married Rachel. Leah gave Jacob 6 sons and a daughter, but Rachel remained childless. Finally, God answered her prayers and sent her a son. Rachel named the boy Joseph. Jacob and the angel. Genesis 31 through 33. Jacob stayed with Laban for 20 years. In those years he grew rich, raising sheep and cattle. One night God came to Jacob in a dream and told him to return to the land of his birthright. Jacob knew Laban would be angry if he left, so when Laban was away, Jacob rounded up his own cattle and sheep, taking his 2 wives and 12 children, and all his animals and servants. Jacob headed for Gilead. When Laban discovered that Jacob was gone, he was filled with fury. He and his men followed Jacob for 7 days. In that time, God calmed Laban's hatred, so when Laban finally caught up with Jacob, they settled their quarrel and parted as friends. Jacob sent messengers ahead to his twin brother Esau. "Tell Esau that I am coming with all my cattle, servants, and family," Jacob told them, "and that I pray he will greet me without anger." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they told him that Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. Jacob was terrified. He divided his people into 2 groups, for he thought that if Esau destroyed one group, the other might escape. Then Jacob asked God for help. "Deliver me, please, from the hand of my brother," he prayed. He took 220 goats, 220 sheep, 30 camels, 40 cows, 10 bulls, and 30 donkeys, and gave them to his messengers. When you meet Esau, give him these animals, and say they are gifts from his brother, who is following close behind." Jacob said that night that Jacob sent his family across the river Jabbok for safekeeping. When Jacob was alone, a stranger appeared. Silently, the man approached Jacob and without a word began to wrestle with him. As they wrestled silently all night, Jacob realized the stranger was an angel. At dawn, the angel said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." "I will not let you go unless you bless me," Jacob said. "What is your name?" the angel asked. "My name is Jacob," said Jacob. "From now on, you will be called Israel. Your name means one who strives with God," said the angel. Then the angel departed, and Jacob realized that he had seen God face to face. When the sun rose, Jacob saw Esau heading his way with 400 men. Jacob crossed the river and quickly divided into his children among Leah and Rachel and their maids. He walked ahead of his large family, bowing to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother Esau. Esau ran up to Jacob and embraced him. Together they wept. "Who are these people you have brought with you?" Esau asked. "This is my family, the children whom God has graciously given your servant," Jacob said. All of Jacob's children and wives bowed down to Esau. "But why did you send me all of those gifts?" Esau asked. Jacob explained that he had hoped to please him. "But I have enough, my brother," Esau said. Jacob insisted that Esau accept everything he had offered. "When I saw your face just now, it was like seeing the face of God," said Jacob. Jacob and his brothers. Genesis 37 through 41. Jacob had 12 sons. His favorite was Joseph, his first son by his wife Rachel. When Joseph was 17 years old, his father made him a coat of many colors. Jacob's beautiful gift to Joseph made his other sons very jealous of Joseph. They began to hate their brother and spoke unkindly of him. One night, Joseph had a strange dream. The next morning he told the dream to his brothers. "I dreamed we were binding bushels of wheat in the field, and my bushel arose and stood up. Then all of your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." Soon after, Joseph reported a second dream to his family. "I dreamed that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me," he said with wonder. Joseph's brothers were outraged. Even his father was cross. "Are you to rule us?" they all asked. "Are we to bow down before you?" By now the brothers' jealousy and hatred were deep. Jacob kept his thoughts to himself and wondered what his son's dreams could possibly mean. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to find his brothers, who were tending the herds in the fields near Dothan. When his brothers saw Joseph in the distance, they quickly made a plan to kill him. "Here comes a dreamer," they said. "Now is the time to kill him and throw his body into a deep pit. We can say that a wild beast has eaten him. That will show him what his dreams were all about." Joseph's brother Reuben was troubled. "Let us shed no blood," he begged. "Rather than slay him, we can just throw him into a pit in the wilderness." Reuben had to return home, but he planned to come back later and rescue Joseph from the pit. As Joseph came upon his brothers, they overpowered him and stripped him of this beautiful robe. Then they grabbed him and threw him into a pit. Afterward, they sat down to eat. As they ate, they saw a caravan coming from Gilead on its way to Egypt. The camels in the caravan were loaded down with spices. Joseph's brother Judah spoke up. "What good is it for us to kill Joseph and hide his body? Come, let's sell him to those traders as a slave. Because he is our brother, we should spare his life." The other brothers agreed. Joseph's brothers sold him to the traders for 20 pieces of silver, and Joseph was carried away to Egypt. When Reuben later returned and saw Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in grief and anger. But Joseph's other brothers were busy planning how they might fool their father. They killed a goat and took Joseph's beautiful robe and dipped it into the goat's blood. Then they took the robe to their father. "Isn't this Joseph's coat?" they asked the old man. Jacob recognized it at once. He thought Joseph had been killed by wild beasts. Overwhelmed with grief, Jacob ripped his clothes, put on a sackcloth, and mourned for many days. No one could comfort him. When the traders arrived in Egypt, they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt. Potiphar was pleased with his new servant. He saw that Joseph was a hard worker of unusual intelligence. In time, Potiphar left Joseph, completely in charge of his house. God was with him all the time. He blessed all Joseph's work, and Potiphar's house and fields prospered under his hand. Joseph was not only smart, he was handsome as well. Potiphar's wife fell in love with him and tried to make him fall in love with her too. But Joseph resisted her charms. "Your husband trusts me," he said. "He has shared everything with me, but his wife. I cannot love you. It would be a great sin against God." One day Potiphar's wife grabbed Joseph by the sleeve and tried to pull him close to her. Slipping out of his coat, Joseph fled, seeking revenge. Potiphar's wife ran outside. Even though it was a lie, she shouted, "Help! Joseph forced his way into my room. When I cried out, he ran away." Potiphar was so furious that he threw Joseph into prison. While Joseph was held captive, he met the Pharaoh's chief butler and baker, who were also in prison. One night, both men had strange dreams. The butler dreamed about a vine with 3 branches on it. The branches blossomed into clusters of grapes. I took the grapes and pressed the juice into Pharaoh's cup. The butler told Joseph. Joseph knew the meaning of his dream. "The 3 branches are 3 days," he said. "Within 3 days you will be with the Pharaoh again. You will have your old job back. When this comes true, please remember me. Tell the Pharaoh you were in jail with the man who has stolen from his own country. Tell him that I am innocent." Next, the baker told Joseph about his dream. "I dreamed I had 3 baskets stacked on top of my head," he said. The top basket held baked goods for the Pharaoh, and birds were eating out of it. After the man told Joseph his dream, Joseph spoke sadly to him. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Joseph will hang you in 3 days, and the birds will eat your flesh." Within 3 days, everything Joseph predicted came true. The unlucky banker was hanged, and the butler returned to Pharaoh's service. But unfortunately, the butler forgot to mention Joseph to the Pharaoh, and Joseph remained in jail. After Joseph had been in jail for 2 years, Pharaoh had 2 troubling dreams. First, Pharaoh dreamed he was standing by the river Nile when 7 fat, sleek cows came out of the water and began to eat grass. Then 7 thin and gaunt cows came out of the Nile and ate up the fat cows. Next, Pharaoh dreamed that 7 spears of plump grain were growing on one stalk. Suddenly, 7 poor and thin spears of wheat sprang up and swallowed the healthy grain. When Pharaoh woke up from his dreams, he was very worried, and his spirit was troubled. He sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. "What is the meaning of these dreams?" he asked. But no one could tell him. The butler was standing nearby and heard what Pharaoh had said. "Why, I remember a young Israelite who was in prison with the baker and me," he said. "When we had strange dreams, he interpreted them for us. Everything he predicted came true. The baker was hanged, and I returned for my old job." Pharaoh summoned Joseph from the dungeon at once. "I hear that you can interpret dreams," he said. "It is not I who interprets dreams," Joseph said. "I do this by the power of God." Joseph listened carefully while Pharaoh told him his two dreams. Then Joseph began to explain their meaning. "God is revealing that you will have 7 good years of harvest with plenty throughout the land. But then will come 7 years of famine. It will be as if there had never been plenty. God sent you these two dreams to show that the famine is certain to happen. You need to choose someone who is wise to oversee a plan to store food for the time of the famine." Pharaoh was deeply grateful. "You will be the head of my house," he told the young man. "You will be second in command only to me. Everyone must obey your orders." Before Joseph could speak, Pharaoh took off his special ring and placed it on Joseph's finger. He ordered his servants to bring Joseph clothes of fine linen. Then he hung a gold chain around his neck. He presented Joseph with a good wife, who was Potiphar's daughter, and sent him out to save Egypt. Joseph set to work at once. He ordered the Egyptians to store as much grain as possible. When the famine came, it affected people everywhere. But because of Joseph's good and hard work, the people of Egypt had plenty to eat. They even had enough food left over to sell to people who came from far away. Joseph's brothers visit Egypt. Genesis 42 through 46. When the famine spread to Canaan, Joseph was afraid he and his family would starve to death. "Why are you doing nothing?" Jacob asked his sons. "Go to Egypt and buy grain for us, so that we can survive." 10 of Jacob's sons left for Egypt, but Jacob was afraid to let his youngest son Benjamin go with them, so he kept him at home. When the brothers arrived in Egypt, they went before Joseph, who was in charge of giving out the grain. Joseph's brothers did not recognize him, believing he was an important Egyptian. They bowed down in front of him, with their faces to the ground. Joseph knew at once who they were, but he hid his feelings and pretended they were strangers. "Where are you from?" Joseph asked in a harsh voice. When the brothers told him they were from Canaan, Joseph appeared to be angry and suspicious. "You are spies," he said coldly. "You have come to spy on us." The brothers shrank back in fear. "No, we are honest men. We have never been spies. We are all the sons of one man. Our youngest brother is at home with our father, and our other brother is dead. We have only come to buy grain." Joseph decided to put his brothers to a test. "If you ever want to leave here, one of you must go and get your youngest brother," he said. "But first you are all going to prison for 3 days until I send for you again." 3 days later, Joseph sent for his brothers. He gave them wheat. Again, he demanded that they bring their youngest brother back to Egypt. "If you do not, I will put you to death," Joseph said. "I'm keeping one of you as hostage to make sure you obey me. It's because of our great wrong against Joseph that we are being punished," they whispered to each other in their own language. They didn't realize that Joseph could understand everything they said. Their distress touched him greatly, and he turned away to hide his tears. As his brothers talked among themselves, Joseph seized the one named Simon, and had him tied up. He ordered his servants to fill his brothers' bags with grain. Joseph also ordered that the money they used to pay for the grain be hidden in their sacks. The brothers loaded their donkeys with the sacks of grain and left for Canaan. As they stopped to feed the animals, one brother discovered the money in his sack. "What is this?" he cried fearfully. "What has God done to us?" Joseph's brothers returned home in tears. They told their father what had happened. "I have lost Joseph and Simon," said Jacob, "and now you want to take away another son. I will never allow you to take Benjamin, for I will die of grief if anything should ever happen to him." The famine in Canaan was severe, and the grain quickly ran out. Once more Jacob gathered his sons and told them to return to Egypt for more food. "But we were warned we had to bring Benjamin back with us," said Judah. When Jacob protested, Judah tried to reassure his father. "Please let us take Benjamin," he said. "I will be responsible for bringing him home safely. If anything happens to him, the blame will be on my head forever." Reluctantly, Jacob agreed. He told his sons to take gifts of fruits, nuts, and honey. He also told them to take twice the payment they had taken before, and asked them to give back the money they had discovered in their sacks. The brothers returned to Egypt with their youngest brother Benjamin. When Joseph heard of their arrival, he ordered his servants to prepare a feast, and he invited his brothers to his house. Fearfully, they told Joseph's steward about the money they had found in their sacks. The steward's answer surprised them. "Your God must have put treasure in your sacks for you," he said. "You gave me money when you were here before." Then the steward brought their brother Simon out to them. Joseph soon arrived, and his brothers presented their gifts to him. When Joseph saw Benjamin, he was overcome with emotion and left the room to weep. After he washed his face, he invited his guests to dinner. He gave Benjamin 5 times the food he gave the others. After dinner, Joseph ordered his servants to put the money back into the brothers' sacks. He also ordered them to put a silver cup into Benjamin's. As they rode away, Joseph sent his steward to stop the brothers and searched their belongings. The steward found the money in the silver cup. The brothers were so scared, they tore their clothes in despair. When they were brought back to face Joseph, they fell to the ground. "What have you done?" Joseph demanded angrily. He ordered his brothers to return home, but he demanded that he leave Benjamin behind in Egypt. Judah stepped forward. "We promised our father we would return with our brother Benjamin. Our father is an old man, and his happiness depends on the well-being of the boy. Please let me stay in his place. If we return without our brother, I cannot bear the pain that would come upon our father." Joseph ordered everyone except his brothers out of the room. "I am Joseph, your brother," he said, weeping. The brothers could hardly believe what he was saying, and they were speechless. Joseph hugged Benjamin and kissed each of his brothers. He asked them to go back to Canaan and return with their families. When Jacob's sons returned home with the good news about Joseph, the old man was overjoyed. "My son is still alive!" cried Jacob. "I must see him before I die." Jacob's family gathered all their possessions and returned at once to make their home in Egypt. At long last, Jacob was joyfully reunited with his beloved lost son. Amen.